Hey team, Hunter Goad here from Spring Lake, North Carolina. I graduated from the University of Tennessee in 2011. Currently trying to knock out this MBA concentrated in supply chain management. Looks like I'll be done in the spring of 2022. After graduating from the University of Tennessee, I commissioned into the United States Army as a logistics officer. I moved to places like Honduras, Poland, Richmond, Virginia, Fort Campbell, Kentucky over the last 5 years. I look forward to working with you guys in the future, and I hope you guys enjoy this presentation. What is the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the word Army? Typically, people think of guns, infantry raids, flyover bombings, or other combat operations. What's usually an afterthought or unknown is the logistics that goes behind supporting these type of missions. For every win that the Army's combat arms achieves, an emerging issue and problem set arises for the logistics community. When I say this, I am referring to how logistic units plan to resupply combat units of their food, ammunition, and supplies needed for their next mission. We are also talking about them conducting maintenance on their vehicles, aircrafts, and tank fleets, so they are fully mission capable for the next battle. And finally, the planning and deliberate movement of troops to appropriate places at the appropriate times for the next encounter. Today, we will take a look at just a small piece of these logistical operations. We will be covering forecasting within warehouses in the military and how the Army has recently begun to standardize stockage across these warehouses. First, I will give you some baseline information on military warehouses. The Army has national and local level warehouses. We will stick to local ones as these are the ones ran by military personnel and are responsible for the distribution to end customers. These local level warehouses are known as the Supply Support Activities, or better known in the Army for the acronym SSAs. These warehouses can stock anywhere from hundreds to thousands of line items at one time. The overall value of these line items can range anywhere from $1 million to over $20 million, depending on the customers supported. Typically, an aviation unit is the highest dollar amount SSA. An accountable officer is tasked to sign for these lines and is ultimately held responsible for the accountability of them and the overall health of the warehouse. There are usually roughly 6 of these warehouses at a large Army installation, each with their own specific customer set. It can range from them supporting a tank unit, or aviation unit, or a ground infantry unit. Warehouses are manned by soldiers that have been specifically trained for warehouse operations. A typical warehouse usually has around 40 personnel, ranging from a private in the Army all the way up to a sergeant first class or warrant officer. There are 5 sections to the warehouse. There is stock control, issue section, receiving section, storage section, and lastly turn-in. Most of these sections explain themselves, but I will give a quick insight to turn-in. The Army has items that are coded to go back into the supply system for refurbishing or retrograding. When an item has this code, the customer is forced to turn these items into the turn-in section, back at the SSA. Once the turn-in section receives it, they then send it to the national level supply system so it can go through its refurbishing or retrograding. Also, any excess inventory found by maintenance motor pools will be turned in back to the SSA turn-in section to go back into the overall Army supply system. An SSA's on-hand stock is called the ATF, or Authorized to Forecast Stockage Line, which is managed by the storage section. The SSA will store this stock using pallets, shelves, racks, open yards, containers, hazardous areas, and banned storage. It is important to realize this stockage must be expeditionary though, as the military has shifted away from wars in the Middle East, or central focus has turned to near-peer threats like China and Russia. If there were wars, the SSA would go into these countries with their customers, like the ground infantry units and tank units, they would be supporting. The expectation is the SSAs to remain close enough to support these customers. With enemies that have more advanced intelligence and weaponry, it is expected that no one can remain in any one location without being detected and targeted in a fairly rapid manner. SSAs must account for this when finalizing their stockage line so they can move out of a footprint in roughly 30 minutes notice. This is also why the Army has shifted to more containerized storages so things can be lifted and moved in a more expeditious manner. The Army has recently began implementing a common authorized stockage line, also known as the castle system. This would make all mirroring units with the same equipment have nearly identical exact stockage lines in their SSAs. So for instance, every aviation unit in the Army, their SSAs would have the same stockage lines. Every tank unit in the Army, their SSAs would have the same stockage line. The Army used to allow similar units to create and manage their own stockage, but after advanced review, they are using demand across the Army to generalize all mirroring unit stocks. Data and observation taken from units training in November 2019 has found this change has increased readiness and made SSAs much more expeditionary. So how's the stockage decided? It is derived through quantitative forecasting via time series analysis. To ensure the right items were stocked, historical needs of the equipment and parts are analyzed through an authorized to forecast annual review and demand analysis to determine which required parts the supporting SSA should keep on hand. As consumption occurs for the material items and the safety stock is reached, automatic reordering takes place. Each annual review kicks out changes to the ATF across the Army, and SSAs comply by adding or removing those lines. It is also possible for an individual warehouse to have a small amount of lines, no more than 25 of these lines, that they keep in the ATF even if it is not authorized through the castle system. These 25 lines can only be directed to stay on by the commander of these SSAs. So what is the system doing this reordering, forecasting, and reviews? The Army uses Global Combat Support System Army, also known as GCSS Army. GCSS Army is one program consisting of two components. The first is the Army Enterprise Systems Integration Programs, which provides the system's enterprise hub services and centralized master data management capabilities. The second component, ERP Solutions, provides functional services to the business enterprise and warfighting mission areas focused on property book, supply operations, tactical maintenance, logistics management, and associated tactical finance functionality, serving as the tactical financial system of record for the Army. GCSS Army is an integrated solution which is a single database accessible to all authorized users. This integration promotes accuracy, timeliness, and enables significant economies of scale in such areas as system support, training, and management. In short, this system acts as a CPFR for the Army. What are the variables within the forecasting? Occasionally, there are certain variables that pop up that can make certain months or periods of time less predictable for warehouse managers. If a unit has been at home for a year and then deploys, it can be expected that their previous year forecast will be much smaller than the years the unit's deployed. This is because equipment and supplies are typically not used as much at home sitting as compared to during a deployment. With that being said, the Army does account for this with larger stocks for deployed units. Also, training at home can cause larger orders for short periods of time. But since annual training usually takes place for all units, this is accounted for in typical annual forecasts and analysis. The Army strives to increase readiness and mobilization year to year. They have implemented systems in place to better equip warehouses to forecast what customers need so they can have it on stock and not have to go to a national level. With near-peer threats constantly improving, it is important that the United States not only has the deadliest arsenal, but also the quickest and most precise supply chain. It could be the difference between victory or defeat. While the castle is currently the newest big thing, it is only a matter of time before the Army has a newer and improved way to forecast and better predict what stockage is needed to exceed. Thank you for your guys' time and attention. And remember, next time you hear the word Army, think logistics.